The Portland Trail Blazers season ended in familiar fashion, a first-round exit.
The Portland Trail Blazers will have been eliminated 4 of the last 5 years in the first round, and that is it.
The Blazers currently own the NBA's longest playoff streak at 8 years and counting, and did make the Western Conference Finals in 2019. But Portland's only made it out of the first round once in the last 5 years, and have won just 4 series total during that 8-year run. Terry Stotts paid for that perennial postseason failure with his job, though the former head coach and the Blazers will tell you they mutually agreed to part ways. Yeah, sure, just like Chris Martin and Gwyneth Paltrow consciously uncoupled. The unfortunate truth for Blazers fans is that Stotts' dismissal is far from the only step needed to right this sinking ship. And the ultimate destination is probably a sight no one in Portland wants to see: Damian Lillard in another team's jersey. The Blazers were seen as 2020 offseason darlings when they acquired Robert Covington and Derrick Jones Jr., adding much-needed defensive length and versatility to a Lillard and CJ McCollum-led lineup that traditionally skewed offensive. But things didn't pan out as intended. The Blazers finished 29th in defensive efficiency during the regular season, and bled points at an even worse rate during the team's first-round loss to a banged-up, Jamal Murray-less Nuggets team. Portland dealt with its own share of injuries throughout the season, during which they went 42-30 to finish 6th in the West. But this was always a flawed, mediocre team being propped up by another ridiculous Lillard season, especially in the clutch.
Blazers get the tip. 5 seconds left. Covington trying to get it to Dame. He puts it on the floor. Step back 3 from Dame. Painted! Damian Lillard!
The Blazers went 24-13 in NBA-defined clutch games, contests within 5 points or less in the final 5 minutes. That was the 4th best clutch record in the league, and Portland also owned the best clutch time point differential. All of that was thanks to Dame, who led the league in clutch scoring while shooting 51% from the field, 39% from deep, and 95% from the free throw line during clutch minutes. The playoffs were a similar story, and Portland's dependence on Dame bailing them out in crunch time has never been more apparent than it was in a Game 5 loss to Denver. Lillard exploded for 55 points, 10 assists, 6 rebounds, 3 blocks, a steal, and an NBA record 12 three-pointers to drag the Blazers back from a 22-point deficit and force 2 overtime periods with iconic game-time shots minutes apart.
Lillard telling him to get out of his way. Lillard on a 3. And he hits!
Oh my goodness.
Damian Lillard. Lillard steps back, fires, banks it in again!
Oh my goodness. I cannot believe what I'm witnessing here, partner.
Over the final 15 minutes and 25 seconds of that game, Lillard scored or assisted on 31 of Portland's final 33 points. For the game, McCollum, Norman Powell, and Carmelo Anthony combined to shoot 15 of 47. Lillard scored 17 points on 6 of 8 shooting during the 2 overtime periods, during which time his teammates combined to shoot 1 of 14. Over a 31-second span in the final minute of OT, with the Blazers down 3, Robert Covington bricked a dunk attempt created by Lillard's penetration, and McCollum stepped out of bounds to turn the ball over after taking a pass from Dame.
Oh dear God.
It was an all too familiar scene for the Blazers, as Lillard's teammates failed to pick him up when it mattered most after spending the entire game on his shoulders. Even Jusuf Nurkic, Portland's most important defensive player, let Dame down by consistently fouling out in that first-round series versus Denver. In fairness to Nurk though, while he did take too many undisciplined fouls on both ends of the court, it doesn't help his cause that he's under constant pressure as a rim protector because the Blazers' perimeter players are all incapable defensive sieves.
That's harsh.
General manager Neil O'Shea sounds like he doesn't want to take any blame for the team's failures, and seems to believe he can find a new head coach capable of building a respectable defense without drastic changes to the roster. But this is clearly a failure of roster construction. O'Shea is basically testing Einstein's definition of insanity at this point, doing the same thing over and over again while expecting different results. Lillard and McCollum are poor defenders on their best days. Nurkic, when he's even available, hasn't fully regained the step he lost due to a gruesome 2019 leg injury. Enes Kanter can be toyed with and played off the court when he's forced to defend in space. Covington solves a ton of problems with his undersized rim protection and one-on-one work, but he's not capable of being a one-man defense, while Jones wasn't quite himself this season defensively. A thin bench reliant on Carmelo Anthony, Anthony Simons, and Nasir Little only raised more questions on defense, as did turning Gary Trent Jr. and Rodney Hood into the more offensively explosive Norman Powell at the trade deadline. Powell's a much more complete offensive player, but given Trent's upside and youth, it's worth wondering whether Powell was enough of an upgrade to justify turning a 22-year-old pending restricted free agent into a 27-year-old pending unrestricted free agent.
That doesn't make sense.
If the Blazers were willing to put Trent on the table to make a win-now splash, could they not have found a return that addressed some of their defensive issues? At some point, we do have to acknowledge Dame is part of the problem too. The guy exerted virtually zero effort on the defensive end in the first-round loss to Denver. But he's also a top 10 player in a golden age of NBA talent. And that's the kind of superstar you build around while trying to mask his flaws. Do Lillard's defensive deficiencies make building a contending roster around him a little trickier? Sure, but there are less than a handful of perfect superstars, and better teams have been built around much worse players than Dame. The tough question for O'Shea and the Blazers is how do they go about doing that? McCollum's set to earn roughly $100 million over the next 3 years. How many teams are really lining up to take on that contract for a one-way scoring guard who's never made an all-star team? Covington, Nurkic, and Jones will all be on expiring deals next season, but is a package made up of some combination of those guys and future picks moving the needle much? Simons is interesting, but not enough to be the centerpiece of a trade for a star. The Blazers also don't own any 2021 draft picks, and are already capped out before even taking into account the possibility of re-signing Powell, who could command a $20 million salary. The harsh reality is that it might already be too late to salvage Lillard's greatness in Portland. Given the team's roster, cap sheet, and draft capital, the best O'Shea and the Blazers can hope for is subtle improvement, but that's not good enough, because Portland's still too far from true contention for marginal gains to make the difference. Dame has always said the right things and walked the walk when it comes to remaining committed to the only NBA team he's ever known. He's earned himself a reputation as the ultimate culture-setting franchise star, and he just won the league's annual Teammate of the Year award. But we've seen this story play out in the NBA too many times before. Lillard will be 31 when next season tips off, his 10th in the association. He's a 6-time All-Star and future Hall of Famer who's appeared in just one conference final. He may not be ready to admit it to himself, but if Lillard wants to win and wants Dame time to include May and June going forward, he can't afford to wait out his current contract, which doesn't expire until 2025 in Portland. Thanks for watching. If you like this video and want to see more content like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button.